Well, it's good to be together this Sunday morning, July 22nd. This iteration of Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalist Church, the congregation that has gathered this morning. I know that those of you who need to be here are here. Now, I know you might be thinking, you may leave thinking, I'm not sure that I needed to be here. But I also know that in that case, somebody else needed you to be here. So it's good to be together. What a blessing it is to receive the gifts of the congregation and the gifts of musicians this morning. Thanks to Astrick for being our pianist this morning, and to Reverend Renoir for singing. What a joy it is to have all of our voices heard. It was also a blessing for me to have a bit of vacation. Was able to travel to see my family, my parents in Saskatchewan, in Canada. Now, you will have to forgive me, because it did come into my mind a number of times that I thought I might wish to stay there. I don't know what it was. I think it was when I would turn on CNN or that sort of thing. You know, it's like, oh, maybe. So you'll have to forgive me for those thoughts just passing ever so briefly through my mind. During our time there, we were able to toboggan or sled down the great sand hills close to where my sister lives. We floated in the waters of Lake Manitou, which is known as Canada's Dead Sea. It's a terminal lake where over 12,000 years the minerals have collected in this salty water, creating this dense, buoyant water. So there's no way that you can sink. It's a fabulous way to spend a day floating around. And of course, we couldn't miss going to see two Saskatchewan Rough Rider football games. Seems to be a ritual in Saskatchewan. Even when the team is terrible, thousands of people still go out to see them. It's kind of, I think it's got this spirit of agriculture, right? It will be better next time, or it'll be better next year, but we'll still go and cheer the home team on. I thought this morning I would wear I was reminded of Canada, so I wore my Canada stole that a Canadian minister colleague made for the Canadian ministers who are welcoming Unitarian Universalist ministers in 2009 to our convocation that was held in Ottawa. One of the interesting visits that Ruth Cruz and I did was to a museum that was called the Sukanen Ship Pioneer Village and Museum. It was just south of the city of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. It was a kind of a fascinating place. It was this eclectic mosh posh of buildings that had been collected from villages around, old elevator, and then each building was just filled with artifacts. Now, I know that some people, including some of my family members, would call it junk, but there were just rooms full of interesting things from the past. Old train station that had moved there. All the contents of a drugstore that had been closed. There's all kinds of things that you could get into. But the highlight of the museum was this ship. And the story behind this ship. It was called the Sukanen ship, and it was built by a fella by the name of Tom Sukanen. Now, I read his story at the museum, and I thought, gosh, there seems to be a lot of hyperbole here. I'm not sure if for some reason pioneer stories get exaggerated and full of hyperbole, etc. So I took it all with a grain of salt. But the story is that this fella, Tom Sukanen, was born in Finland and immigrated with some 300,000 Finnish folks at the turn of the last century when economic conditions in Finland were difficult. He originally landed in Minnesota, and started a family there. But at some point decided that he wanted to try his luck at farming in Saskatchewan and to homestead there. So the story goes he walked from Minnesota to Saskatchewan. He walked the whole way from Minnesota to Saskatchewan, and he met his brother there and created a homestead, but he had left his family in Minnesota. So again, the story goes 7 years later, he returns to Minnesota. Now, he walked all the way back to find that the woman he had married had died and his children were all in foster care. He tried to bring his son, who he found, across the border, but they would not allow him to cross the border into Canada, the story goes. And so, in despair, he walked back to Saskatchewan, where he began to dream of a time where he could return to Finland. And having the skills of a shipbuilder that he had learned in Finland in his childhood, he began to build this ship that he was going to put on the South Saskatchewan River at its high point and sail down the South Saskatchewan River to the Hudson Bay, and then from the Hudson Bay into the sea to Greenland, Iceland, and finally home to Finland. Now, he never made it. He was so obsessed with this project that it consumed him, and he would eventually be hospitalized and die in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. He, according to the story, had a fierce independence. In fact, he was going to build this ship by himself on his own, and folks in the district said, well, we will give you materials to achieve your dream. And he would always say, no, the story goes, no, I don't want anything that I cannot pay for and do on my own. So though his story is not one of interdependence, the story of how the ship got to this museum is, because folks gathered together and said, we want to preserve this and show this to others. And so through the years from 1969 to now, this small little tiny museum in Saskatchewan that is full of artifacts and only run by volunteers is able to tell this interesting, maybe fantastic story of a Finnish shipbuilder who had this dream of sailing from the prairies. You know, like Saskatchewan is flat. It's not very close to an ocean, but a dream of sailing away. So we were able to walk into this ship and check it out. I think that the museum itself is a testament to the interdependent nature of the human spirit, meaning that people who band together can do something that each of us cannot do alone. Science fiction writer Octavia Butler writes, as we heard this morning, that civilization is to groups what intelligence is to individuals. It is a means of combining the intelligence of many to achieve ongoing group adaptation. In other words, we humans are greater than the sum of our parts. I sometimes look at this notion for me as a higher power. We think about this idea of a higher power, and for me that higher power is me plus another, or me plus two others, or me plus a community, or communities band together. That is where I find higher power, in the interdependence that we create together. Interdependence is the mutual dependence that exists between things, exists between humans. It's the dependence between things, the quality of condition of being interdependent or mutually reliant on each other. I've been reading this fabulous new book called Emergent Strategies that's written by an organizer named Adrienne Marie Brown. She writes about the inspiration that she's received from the late science fiction writer Octavia Butler's explorations in her fiction of our human relationship to change. Brown describes these ideas of emergent strategies as radical self-help, society help, and planet help, designed to shape the futures that we want to live in. Octavia Butler reminds us in her writings that change is constant, and the world is in a state of constant flux. Now, we know that Octavia Butler isn't the only person who has shared this notion of a worldview of constant change. I think of Buddhist philosophy, that the only thing that is constant is change. I recall a number of years ago, I think, it was maybe 1996, I went to an international summer institute that was looking at cultural restoration of oppressed Indigenous peoples at the University of Saskatchewan. And one of the speakers was Leroy Littlebear, who is a Blackfoot professor who spent many years at the University of Lethbridge. And he was talking about the Blackfoot worldview and mentioned that, the Blackfoot see that the world is in, and he used the words, constant flux. And then he went on to say in his wry humor, that's why Blackfeet people don't make 5-year plans, nor 1-year plans, in fact, not even a week's plan, Leroy Littlebear's had. The world, according to so many, is a stream of ever-mutating and emergent patterns. In this book, we're invited to, rather than steeling ourselves against change, rather to feel, to map, to assess, to learn from the swirling patterns that surround us in order to better comprehend and influence them as they happen. Part of Brown's calling to us to pay attention to emergent patterns is based in the natural world, based in witnessing to the natural world and understanding how that calls us to interdependence. One of those examples is, another Canadian example, though you get to experience this Canadian example in the U.S., Canada geese, right? So if you have witnessed to the migration of Canada geese, you have seen them flying in that V pattern overhead. And if you have watched them carefully, the lead position in that V is always changing. That lead goose will drop back and will take a rest for a while another leader takes that goose's place. And that goes like that all the way along. Interdependence, not depending on one leader, sharing that responsibility. I've also learned that when a goose is injured during the migration, 2 other geese will land with the injured goose and stay with that goose until either they are healed or die. And then they will return to the flock together. They will catch up. Flocking for birds is about interdependence, as well as decentralization of the effort for safety, as trusted leadership will come from the edges of the flock. How can we imagine that as a religious community, our leadership is always changing, that we're all leaders, and that we can share in this responsibility, and that leadership can come from anywhere in the community? Another example of interdependence from nature is that of trees like the birch or ash or mangrove. They share a common root. I recall taking my students when I taught in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, to Prince Albert National Park, where these very large, trembling aspen stands. And they have these towers that you can climb up to look across. And we were imagining that, in fact, that large stand of aspen, trembling aspen, that you could see as far as the horizon were, in fact, one plant, one organism. Now, they weren't the largest. I'm told that the largest stand organism is close to the Grand Tetons and is called Pando. It is also a stand of aspen. Marissa Lewis writes that in nature, everything works in collaboration. There are hummingbirds and flowers that are in such deep coordination. They need each other for survival. How vibrant and alive and successful could our movement be if we moved with such coordination and collaboration? It's unfortunate that for many of us, we swim in this other story. You know, a story like this story that I told you of Tom Sukinen and his fierce independence, and this steady diet of admonitions that we receive to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, being fed this constant stream of messages that make us think that we ourselves need to be fiercely independent, that we can do it alone, that we should work on our own to develop, survive, and win at life. And though, of course, we still witness to much competition in the natural world, and in the absence of reason, it does appear to be a viable way to manage communities, competition. The author, Brown, argues that humans compete when it really isn't even necessary. So rather than working together to create more sustainable communities than we can when we compete, we humans often dedicate our intelligence to outsmarting one another. Sometimes I see this even in places like my own Unitarian Universalist ministry, my striving to think, how do I become known, or how do I do a great job, rather than thinking of how do we do this ministry together? How does the sum become great? The sum become greater than its parts? What would it look like to eschew competition and to embrace interdependence? I think it would be a practice. And like any good practice, before we start it, we have to pause for a public service announcement. That public service announcement is that this Tuesday, the 24th, there's some important things happening in the county of Contra Costa at the Board of Supervisors. At 9 a.m., they'll be meeting to discuss approving all of the recommendations that have come from the Racial Justice Task Force. And then at 2 p.m., for the first time in California, there'll be what's called a Truth Act forum, because state legislation requires any jurisdiction in California whose law enforcement personnel who have provided access to ICE, that's Immigration and Customs Enforcement, to hold a community forum to inform the public. People are invited to come together at that time to support the Racial Justice Task Force's recommendations and to ask questions of legislators and leaders around the interaction between Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the Sheriff's Office in Contra Costa County. It's interesting. If the sum is to be greater than the parts, we need to all be part. And that's why I think as a community we struggle to affirm and promote the worth and dignity of every person and know that all people are important in our communities, and we strive to do that together. And so back to this practice. Adrienne Marie Brown suggests that interdependence is iterative, that it requires repetition. And so to leave with, here are 4 iterative practices for interdependence that you may wish to practice. The first is to be seen. The second is to be wrong. The third is to accept one's inner multitudes. And the fourth, and finally, is to ask for and receive what one needs. So being seen, our independence requires that as much as possible, we are each seen as our true selves. This requires vulnerability. Often people that I speak to will take a hiatus from community when they're struggling the most. And I often wonder what it is, how we are failing as a community when people think that they have to leave when they are most vulnerable, as opposed to stay in the interdependence and ask for and receive the support that they need. How can we each make our capacity for engaging with others and our needs from others as transparent as possible? It may mean releasing that veneer which some of us deploy for guard and for protection. Like the song says that we sometimes sing here, for no one can fill those of your needs that you don't let show. Be wrong. The easier being wrong is for you, the faster you can release your viewpoint, the quicker you can adapt to changing circumstances. And adapting allows you to know and name current needs and capacities to be in relationship in real time. It may be the very, being wrong may be the very place that you discover that you are wrong, and it becomes the most fertile space for connecting and receiving with others. Accept your inner multitudes, meaning that we are complex beings that often, if not always, carry with us contradictory truths. So I am deeply concerned about the labor practices of fast food restaurants, but I am known sometimes to take my sons for ice cream at one of those fast food restaurants. I hold those two truths at the same time. I'm deeply concerned about how technology is built and created and the pollution it leaves, but here I am with my iPad and my iPhone this morning. There are so many other contradictions that we carry. I think it's hard to live in the society with what we do without these inner multitudes, without our own contradictions. So let's accept them and live with them. How can we be vulnerable with others and honest about our own inner contradictions? In doing so, we help others to move towards our best selves and their best selves. Finally, ask for and receive what we need. Can we ask others for what we need, allowing them to offer us assistance? What we're going to do right now is we're just going to do a little exercise before we all go home. So by practicing interdependence, we can be greater than the sum of our parts. It is this higher power that we create in community, in human community. Now, interdependence isn't easy, but it's worth doing. But anything that's worth doing is hard work and worth doing over the long haul. So, Grace Lee Boggs says that building community is to the collective as spiritual practice is to the individual. So I'd like to combine an individual spiritual practice with the collective action of community building. Earlier we heard, we didn't because I haven't told you yet, but I'm going to share some questions that Adrienne Marie Brown poses in her book as examples of what the practice is I would like you to do. So, she suggests that we ask for and receive what we need. Can you drive me to the hospital? Can you explain what's happening to me? Can you stop my pain? Can you open this water bottle? Can you help me stand up? Can you help me sit down? Can you open the door? Can you put my bag in the overhead bin? Can you buy me groceries? Can you drive me to the airport, park, and take me in with my suitcases? Can you hold me while I cry? Can you heal me? Can you listen while I feel this again and again? So you have an index card, and if you don't have one of those index or recipe cards, you can put up your hand. The ushers are going to look for you if you need one, to hand you one. And I'm going to invite you to write on that card, starting with the two words, can you? Can you? And then I want you to write something that you need to ask for. Can you? Invite each one of you to write. Now, this is just practice, and I know that it's hard to ask others for what we need, but this is going to be anonymous. We're not going to have to ask somebody else. You're just going to write it on the card. And then if you feel comfortable, I'm going to ask you to pass those cards towards the center, and the ushers are going to collect the cards. And as they get collected, I'm going to read some of them. So your request may be read aloud. This is hopefully just a way to share what those needs are. I know that sometimes it is hard to do that, so this is just a way to practice. So I invite you, starting with can you, and a question. And as you do that, if you just pass those index cards towards the center, the ushers will collect them, and I will take a few moments just to read a few things that are on that card. Would you join in practicing asking for what we need together? Can you give me a massage today? Can you help me move past my fear of changing jobs? Can you help me let go of my self-criticism? Can you help me stop overspending? Can you give me comfort in this most painful time of loss, please? Can you go with me on a road trip? I'll provide the vehicle. Can you be open and honest with me and yourself? Can you get us a new president? Can you help me become a better member of this community? Can you make my ankles and knees stronger? Can you listen to my stand-up comedy routine? Can you just come over and talk and share? Can you take my son to swim practice so I can go to work? Can you help me stay strong raising my 12-year-old headstrong girl? Can you explain why you dislike me because of our political viewpoints? Can you look at me when we are talking together? Can you really accept and appreciate me as I am? Can you watch my kiddo on Tuesday so that I can attend the social justice hearings? Can you help me take my pain medication before I suffer too much? Can you offer support by listening? Can you take care of my dog for me? She's a good girl. Can you listen to me without judging me? Can you just listen to me? Can you drive me to the library? Can you help me clean out my storage area? Can you walk my dog? Can you remain young? Can you encourage me to use my voice in a big way? Say amen out loud when the Spirit moves you. Can you give me a feeling of independence? Can you prep some dinner meals for me? Can you help lead a group? Can you stop the changes in the climate? Can you sign a petition for a candidate for City Council? Can you provide a used bicycle for the 12-year-old daughter of the Balazs scholar from Romania so that she can ride a bike when she arrives? Can you tell me who that is? What name? What have I forgotten today? Can you help me write my history? Can you just notice the injustice and fear in the world? Can you love me for who I am? Can you do a good deed every day? Can you stick with me and talk even though I'm awkward? Can you spend some time with me? Can you house sit and dog sit for me while I take some travel time? Can you help me find a reliable sump pump installer? Someone who can install a sump pump. Can you please use your turn signals while you're driving? Can you help me become financially independent again? Can you speak up for my brain-damaged son, please? Can you speak up for my brain-damaged son, please? Can I give you a key to my house in case I need help? Can you listen to my concerns? Can you help me with some computer questions? Can you have dinner with me? Can you stop talking and listen to me? Can you contact me and take me out to the movies? Can you help me clean out the garage? Can you help me with my problems? Can you show me where to find my community? Can you hear me? Can you help me with my hearing? Can you get oh, can't read that one. Can you help me read that one? Can you help me to sleep? Can you be my friend and laugh with me? Can you give me the validation that I need? Can you take me out to dinner? Can you help me find the right things to do? Can you help me figure out why my printer won't talk to my computer suddenly and help me fix it? Can you keep me company? Can you put out and bring in my trash cans when I'm traveling? Can you help us move? Can you reach that item on the top shelf? Can you loan me a pen right now? Can you help me be my better self? Do you hear the needs that we have just in this room this morning? That we are able to share with each other and they continue. How do we learn to share what our needs are, to offer to help with others' needs, and to accept what we are asking for? What a powerful exercise it is to hear what our needs are. May we all practice our ability to ask for and to receive what we need. May that be so.